Jambo. I'm Lenrod Nzulu Baraka, founder of Afro-Caribbean Spiritual Teaching Center and Children of Kush Publications. These two organizations are dedicated to creating a paradigm shift in Black thought. One of our primary aims is to challenge people of African ancestry to think outside the box of Eurocentric thought. To achieve our objectives, we publish articles which are circulated throughout the African diaspora and on the continent of Africa. We circulate videos like this one on social media, and we also publish books through Children of Kush Publications. Now, Children of Kush Publications is currently expanding and promoting a series of books entitled Secrets Your Church Won't Tell You. The 6 books in the series so far are available from Amazon Kindle store and can be purchased both as hard copies and as ebooks. To see a full listing of my books, you can go to the Amazon Kindle store, and you can check my author page, which is amazon.com/author/Leonard Phillips. That is amazon.com/author/Leonard Phillips. And that's all in lowercase. Or you can simply just type in Lenrod Nzulu Baraka, Leonard Phillips, or the title of any book that you are interested in. If you would like to watch more videos that I produce, you can just type in Leonard Phillips in your YouTube browser and look for my almost handsome face. When I return, I will talk on the subject separation versus integration. So don't you go away. I'll be right back. In 1627, a London merchant company began the first colonization of Barbados with some 83 individuals and 10 enslaved persons. The first settlement in Barbados was at a place called Jamestown. Less than a decade earlier, in August of 1619, 18 Africans were exchanged for food by a ship which anchored at Jamestown, the first permanent settlement in what would later become the United States of America. It is a point of historical interest that the name Jamestown was chosen as the name for the first settlements in both Barbados and in the United States of America. Another point of historical relevance is that these two countries showed a common hostility to enslaved Africans as reflected in their harsh anti-Black laws and treatment. These two countries can therefore be considered as the bastions of white supremacy in both the Caribbean and in the American mainland. Now, in the face of such strident and hostile anti-Black treatment, Black people in the diaspora were forced to choose between two options in their ongoing struggle with white supremacy. On one side of the spectrum was separation. Black people could choose to separate themselves from their persecutors. And this took a number of forms in countries where you had a lot of mountainous regions, like in Jamaica and Suriname. Many enslaved Africans were able to escape and enter into the mountainous region. And hence we had the development of what were called the Maroon societies in the New World. In countries that lacked the geography to allow escape Africans to set up their own communities, Africans then had to deal with the true essence of living in a white-dominated country. But in addition to the concept of separation, there were many enslaved Africans and others who believed in the concept of separation. Now, in our last presentation, we mentioned people like Edward Blyden, Martin Delaney, Alexander Crummell, and of course, Marcus Garvey. All four of these men promoted the idea of the return of Black people in the diaspora to the continent of Africa. And this was one viable option for Africans. And as we have seen in Liberia, this was a resettlement program that was started, free Blacks from North America, and a number of individuals from the Caribbean migrated and set up the country which we today know as Liberia on the African continent. Elijah Muhammad, the founder of the Nation of Islam, advocated a revised form of separation in which he said that the American government, because of what it had done to enslave Africans, should be willing to provide land and financial support for a period of about 25 years so that Black people could set up a nation either in North America or somewhere else. Integrationists, on the other hand, have argued that Black people have earned the right to settle and prosper in the lands where they were distributed by the institution of slavery. Integrationists believe in agitating for more justice, more opportunity, and more political involvement of Black people in the governance of the lands they now reside in. As I mentioned when I announced this topic in my last presentation, Dr. Martin Luther King and El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, more commonly known as Malcolm X, are two of the most well-known proponents of these two views in modern times: separation versus integration. Now, as a minister of the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X shared the separation theology preached by Elijah Muhammad. Malcolm was adamant that Caucasians were not genuine in their rhetoric about ameliorating the living conditions of Black people in America. After reflecting on centuries of maltreatment received by African Americans from the American government and from anti-Black Caucasians in America, Malcolm called on the government of America to let his people go. In his conclusion to a speech delivered at the University of California, Berkeley on October 11, 1963, Malcolm said, and I quote, "Since we are not wanted in this country, let's pack our bags and go home to our own people, to our own land." End of quote. Malcolm anticipated all the objections to going back to the land of our ancestors by saying, Malcolm said, "The propagandists of the American government is skillfully designed to make our people think that our people back home don't want us. Government propagandists tell us constantly Africa is a jungle. Africans are savage and backward. They have no modern convenience. And you are too much like us, while like us white folk. How could you live comfortably back there? And we find out that there are echoes of all that Malcolm said whenever the subject of returning to Africa is brought up, not just among white people, but also among Black people who share some of the very same views. Now, early in the lecture, Malcolm expounded on the land vision of Elijah Muhammad, and Malcolm said, and I quote, "The Honorable Elijah Muhammad has the only permanent solution. 20 million ex-slaves must be permanently separated from our former slave masters and placed on some land that we call our own. Then we can create our own jobs, control our own economy, solve our own problems instead of waiting for the American white man to solve our problems for us." End of quote. Segregationists, therefore, did not trust in the goodwill of Caucasians to give justice and equality to Black people. They believed that Black people would always be treated like second-class citizens in white societies. Separationists also believed that the separation from white-dominated society was seen as the only viable option available to Black people who had the misfortune of living under white-dominated government. Dr. Martin Luther King, on the other hand, had a dream that one day in America, his descendants would be judged by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. If you've been listening closely to US news in recent times, you will notice that the dream of Dr. King is being bandied around in the public square by the Republicans, including even Donald Trump. And this bandying of the dream of Dr. King is being used in such a way as to deny much of what Dr. King really stood for. I'll have more to say on this subject when I look at critical race theory and the notion of America being a colorblind society, or America being now a post-racial society. Dr. Martin Luther King believed in the basic goodness of America and in its Declaration of Independence, which declared that all men were created equal and were endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, namely life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, Dr. King understood the implications of the Declaration of Independence. If all men were created equal and African Americans were men, then every right enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, in the Constitution, and in the Bill of Rights applied to every Black person in the United States. The civil rights marches of Dr. Martin Luther King were therefore designed to persuade the government and white people of the United States that Black people were also people, and that they were entitled to all the rights enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, in the Constitution of the US, and in the Bill of Rights. This was the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King, and it continues to be the dream of present-day Black integrationists in white rule countries. Now, one of the people I tend to follow quite a bit these days in the US is Dr. William Barber, or Reverend William Barber. And one of the things I like about William Barber is that it is almost as though his voice is the moral voice which has replaced Dr. Martin Luther King. Whenever Dr. Barber speaks, he usually focuses on what he likes to call the 5 major problems facing the US. And these problems he usually cites as systemic racism, systemic poverty, Christian nationalism, militarism, and of course, ecological devastation. In his presentations, he will either deal with one of these or sometimes he deals with all of them. Now, Dr. William Barber recently, as he has been looking at what has been happening with systematic voter suppression in the US since the 15th Amendment was gutted of Clause 5, which basically made sure that states that had a history of suppressing the Black vote could not do it unless first it was reviewed by the federal government. With the gutting of the 15th Amendment, what has basically happened now is that that supervising function of the federal government has been removed. And so states that have a history or had a history of voter suppression have been placed back in business. And so what we've seen is a whole host of new voter suppression laws being passed in places like South Carolina, North Carolina, Alabama, those states that had perhaps the worst record of voter suppression during the Jim Crow era. And so Reverend Barber is on record stating that the real hacking going on in the American political system is not what Russia or China may be attempting to do to influence the outcome of the American election. But rather he said that the real hacking that is going on is the racialized voter suppression that is being systematically implemented in many of these countries, or rather not countries, many of these states that were formerly deep into Jim Crow legislation. Dr. Barber is also on record stating that current attempts at voter suppression is the worst attack against Black voting rights since the racial segregation of Jim Crow. President Biden has joined in the cry against racialized voter suppression by stating that what is going on right now represents a 21st century re-implementation of Jim Crow in the US. As Carol Anderson said in her book, White Rage, every advance made by Black integrationists in the US has been met with the inevitable white backlash that tends to wipe out many of the advances that have been made by Black integrationists in the US. Since it is certain that a sizable percentage of white Americans have not gotten the memo about the malevolent nature of racism and white supremacy, Trumpism, white nationalism, the alt-right, and traditional white power groups will continue to dot the American landscape and may even become the normative operational ethics in many places in the US and in other white-dominated countries. I therefore suspect that we've not heard the last of the debate between Black separationists and Black integrationists in white-dominated countries. In our next Tribute to Blackness, we will explore why there is so much underdevelopment in Black-ruled countries. Why is it that Africa and the Caribbean continues to underperform economically? As always, thanks for watching this broadcast. Feel free to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and contacts in the diaspora and on the continent of Africa. Also, feel free to share your comments on what is presented in this video. For example, I would like to hear from you on the subject of what can people in the diaspora do to help make Africa great again. Asante sana na kwaheri, which means thank you very much and goodbye.